Hi, everybody. I just wanted to make this video detailing the experience that I've had working in the education industry, particularly from the experience of teaching within a sort of different context than what I was born into. So, I'm a Canadian, and what that means is I come from a rich country, part of the global north, and in a certain sense, that comes with a set of privileges and benefits um, that allowed me access to powerful accreditation or qualifications in a way that might be easier or more accessible than somebody who would have access to the same qualifications or credentials from the global south. So, as somebody who is now in the global south and was a student in the global north, and now a teacher in the global south, I've hold some, I suppose, perspective on those two systems and how they might contrast in ways that reveals a discourse or a story about the direction of education at a globalized level. So, growing up in Canada, I came from a working class background, relatively, white working class background with exposure, of course, coming from the, Canadian multicultural system. There was a certain promotion of diversity, and there was a certain level of diversity in the population itself. And there was often promotion to diversify the economy through labor that shared many different types of ethnic, national, gendered, class representation, holding up to the fantasies or the dreams of upward mobility as well as inclusion. So coming from that context and also working in it in some respects, as I worked in higher education from a marketing and communications perspective. So there was conversations about what the student body was and what the desires of that student body were and how to attain attention from that student body, etc. And how being in this global south context, I had an opportunity, or I kind of had aspirations of opportunity because it seemed accessible and interesting, to be a teacher in the global south. So to kind of go through my experience as a teacher in the global south, I'm not going to name specific companies, but I first started working in the private education industry here. So my first step into this industry in this country, Vietnam, was with a private education system. So at this point, access to becoming a teacher through the process of, qualification assessment was quite straightforward and relatively easy when it came to my capacity to provide a service to this economy or to these people or to these students. And so I got a job opportunity as a teacher here. And I guess my experience with this particular company was quite positive. There were, there was the company that I had been a part of was attempting to do some pilot initiatives that were really encouraging and kind of interesting about a lot of investment in still a product, but an education model that was trying to um, evolve um, the you know the education industry. So we were doing this hybrid model of teaching online and offline, um, and attempt through research and science, trying to kind of put together something where we would maybe facilitate people's ability to learn, in this context, education, language, um, um, in a different way that might be possibly effective or more effective than a traditional classroom model. So yeah, it was a great pilot project in a way. We were doing part online, part offline. Okay, so though after a few years, I have to be honest, it didn't really work out. It was, it's sometimes it's not really about the outcomes in a way, because outcomes often become messy, right? It's like, I mean, in many ways, this was not a smart project if you're thinking about a private education, um, program. Primarily, if it's going to be privatized, it's just going to be a incredibly, you know, um, deep, financial, um, um, I would say, mindset around if this is a product worth investing in or producing. So yeah, I'm assuming in many cases, oh, this was a very expensive product that was being produced. So it needed to be successful in a financial sense. So um, I'm assuming in how it felt atmosphere wise was that this was not becoming um, a feasible product. It required like the super rich of Vietnam and Saigon to be the core customer group, and it was extremely expensive, and development was expensive. Everything was expensive, expensive, expensive. So eventually, it kind of fluttered out. People were saying, "Oh, research," and research is saying that this model is actually no more effective than a traditional classroom model, etc. But eventually, what really was happening was the project was fizzing out. The investments that weren't there, the hopes, the aspirations, the faith in the project is sputtering, and eventually it died out. It was kind of sad, but it was what it was. So, anyways, COVID came around, things got worse in a way. Teams changed, teams shift. The project got launched, but it didn't really go anywhere. Um, and then that was it. I mean, from that experience, I could say generally, working at this private center, there was an interesting motivation for educational development and innovation. Um, there was also very much an entrenched sense of financial investment and focus throughout my experience there. So, um, it's just something that you would see normally around, is that this comes down to too, and how people are chosen, and who is chosen to be a teacher, and who gets more attention, and who has more marketability. So all these things are normal within this industry in some senses. There's that sort of anxiety, and that's when we come back to value, and who has the value in the space, and who doesn't. Anyways, so yeah, finished. After things shuffled around a lot, I decided to move on. And my next experience was public schools. So, holding some sort of education or understanding about the world, I was very invested in attempting to see what the public school sphere was when it came to education, and how is this education model applied within this context. So yeah, for opportunities within where my direction was the privatized education, again, and this was a company. This company did privatized English, and so what that meant was that this company held multiple contracts with a variety of public schools throughout the area of Saigon. Um, One other thing to be conscientious of, and that I found out later on, was that this company is 100% shareholder owned, or majority shareholder owned. I'm not 100% certain, but it's like if you look at the name of the company, it says like stockholder, shareholder, owner, etc. So you can tell. Anyways, so going into this, it was kind of shocking, to be honest. So it was, I would say, emotionally feeling, but also what you can see is it was worse. It was a little bit shocking. So coming in first impression, investments. Where were the investments in this industry? So I was looking at the facility for teachers. It was kind of bare bones, to say the least. It was dirty, it was old, it was unkempt, it was awkward. I was trying to make assessments too. It's just like, I'm in a developing country, so whatever, but money flow, economic flows, teachers get a lot of money. In, if we're talking about localized levels, if I'm talking about localized perspectives, I'm rich in Vietnam as a teacher, particularly with that position. And a Vietnamese person makes probably 10 times less than I do. A lot less than I do. Okay, so there's this humongous disparity, and I came to a realization, and well, I mean, you can kind of just understand it, is that like we're like in a time warp or a paradox, right? There is the foreigner, people from the global north, and they're in this sort of progressive, I would say, higher position within reality, and that comes with a certain level of benefits and a certain sense of ease of living that you carry because of that privilege. And then there is, in the same sense, the Vietnamese the Vietnamese, what would you say, paradigm. And in the Vietnamese paradigm, it's like, you have to pick up the slack. You have to pick up the slack of what you lost because of history. You have to work harder, you have to work more, and you have to earn less in order to pick up the shit that you lost during the last few centuries of globalization and economic development, or rather neo-colonialism, right? So anyways, it's absolutely dreadful to be witnessing that, but that's the stark reality of the world we live under today. So anyways, I was just working there, and then language, commodification. It was really scary. So commodification of education, almost 100%. Professional development was offered at this private company before. Almost no professional development. It was there in some respects, but then it was just something at the beginning of the year, and it was something to fill the time. So there was so much it felt, emotionally, but you could kind of see it too, that there was a lot of financial priority in most respects of this space. And so what that meant was an anxiety in the space. So, if you're white, if you're male, I'm assuming in some respects, disregarding personal traumas and forms of disposability that kind of are pervasive within our global economy. Yeah, it's not too bad, I guess. But if you're going down the ladder, if you're a bit too racialized, or you're woman, or too feminized, a bit of an anxiety to be in this space. Vietnamese particularly. So then you just see normal things like, okay, there was a bonus because of there was a workload increase. That bonus was cut for Vietnamese first. That bonus was cut for Vietnamese without notice. Okay? It was pretty horrible. And then the bonus got fucked up. So you'd have one paycheck, you get your bonus, one paycheck you wouldn't. And next paycheck, you'd have double bonus because of that. So there was this huge financial anxiety, perpetual anxiety that was going on in this space all the time. No investment in infrastructure, very low investment. My office was dated, it was dark, it was dingy, it was uncomfortable. I did not want to be there in some sense because you know where money is being put, and given how teachers were a commodity. And what I mean by commodity is we got to fill the numbers to make sure the contracts are completed. And we need we need as many contracts as possible in order to meet KPIs or financial demands or forecasts for our shareholders. So it was something of an afterthought. If we have additional income, which could probably also be, appease our shareholders. If we do have additional income outside of that, we could probably improve facilities or maybe do whatever we can to improve. But, it's not a priority in any sense. So there was that feeling in there where it's just like, this is quite dire in the sense of where money is being put, and everybody is relatively commodified in the sense of like, okay, who has value gets more respect, who has less value, whatever. So after about 3 years in this environment, and there are good people. I'm not saying there aren't good people, and there are people trying to do good work, and there are people who are invested in education, and they care. They care a lot. There are a lot of people who cared, but when you're dealing with a model, when you're dealing with a sort of business model that under an education system that prioritizes financial incentive and profit, it becomes quite uncomfortable at times for people to be surviving under that, and to witness it. It's education, of course, shouldn't be understood this way, because it's not a product, right? That was the language. We are selling a product, and we need to make sure that customers, not students, customers are satisfied, and this customer is satisfied, and that they are returning back. They desire. So there's even, it's very an emotional, effective investment, right? So if they learn, great. If we have an funny teacher, or somebody who makes me, somebody who makes me like want to go back to class every day, yeah, then that's optimal. So anyways, after 3 years, I was like, it was too much for me, emotionally. It was too much for me. It was, it was rough to witness this type of education being provided. There was other things too. So yeah, that was that. So at this point, yeah, I would say overall assessment, privatized education was more when it came to private center work was much much better in some sense. So there was, in a way, conscientiousness that we live under a market economy, and what that means is that we have to prioritize profits and ensure that there is a steady growth happening. But in another way, we're not held together by so many contractual restraints, like the public school English education model, that creates incredible amounts of anxiety at so many layered levels of the industry. So yeah, I'm very much more invested in the private education model. So yeah, that's what that was, generally speaking. And other than that, I would say, yeah, at this point for education, having this perspective, and having some more awareness, I feel like there needs to be an understanding that there's a bit of a crisis, well, a huge crisis, and it's already happened in the West, when it comes to education, when we talk about commodification, etc. Yeah, it's so far as your education is producing recognizable economic value, then it is useful. And if it does not provide that value, or it is questioning that system or its production of value, then those programs are not useful or should be removed. Yeah, this is just really providing a kind of look at the world from the global north, in contrast to global south perspective, and giving you a sense of like what the situation is. Yeah, it's you can kind of see that too. You can also see the ideological impacts, because in one way we are teaching a language, but also we're teaching ideology. So we're teaching how to perform personhood, how to be a person through certain ideas of what is, you could say, marketable, or what is right for the world. Global citizenship is going to be held within a certain ideological framework. So as a teacher, for myself, I'm trying to be more conscientious and aware that I'm not simply enforcing an ideology onto my students that they need to perform themselves similarly to a certain type of idea of success, and that this is more about bridging themselves to connecting with the world in this new globalized context. So yeah, anyways, long video, but that's the state of the industry in the global south, and in contrast with the global north. Thanks.